The night was unbearably still, the kind of stillness that makes every small sound feel louder, sharper, almost too real. The desert wind had died down hours ago, leaving behind a silence so heavy it pressed against the ears like a weight. In that silence, Private Elias Turner walked slowly through the scattered remains of what had once been a German field post. The lantern in his hand flickered weakly, barely holding its flame, throwing long, trembling shadows across the sand. He had been separated from his unit during the skirmish that unfolded earlier that afternoon, and now, with darkness swallowing the desert, he moved carefully, listening for anything that might signal danger or safety, whichever came first. Somewhere in the distance, maybe a mile or two, artillery thumped like a distant heartbeat, but here the world felt abandoned. He stepped over a fallen wooden crate, nudging it aside with his boot. The whole place looked deserted, rushed, as if the men stationed here had fled in a hurry. Torn paper, scattered helmets, crushed cigarette tins, and a half-collapsed radio tent lay spread out in messy trails. It looked less like a retreat and more like a panic. Elias swallowed dryly as he scanned the area. His canteen was almost empty. His uniform was still dusty with blood, not his own, and the weight of the day pressed down on him like someone sitting on his chest. He took a slow breath and looked around until something caught his eye. A small metal box half buried in the sand near a broken table. It wasn't military-issued. It looked personal. He walked toward it, boots crunching quietly, and crouched down to brush off the sand. The box was dented on one side, the clasp snapped but still hanging on. He pried it open. Inside were a few folded papers, some photographs, and a small pencil worn down almost to a stub. The photos were yellowed at the edges. A woman with soft eyes and a shy smile. A boy with messy hair holding a wooden airplane. A cottage in a field that looked like it belonged in a painting. They were so ordinary, so painfully human compared to the wreckage around him. Elias stared at them, feeling the strange ache that came whenever reminders of normal life surfaced in the middle of war. Then he unfolded the first letter. The handwriting was neat but slightly shaky, as if written by someone who spent years holding tools instead of pens. "My dearest Clara," it began. Elias paused. The name hung in the air like a fragile thing. He read further. "If this letter ever reaches you, it means I failed to return home as I promised. I write this not to give you sorrow, but so you may hear my voice once more." Elias's breath hitched slightly. He looked over his shoulder instinctively, as if reading someone else's last words was a crime committed in the open. He kept reading. The man, whoever he was, wrote about the fear he tried to hide, the nights he lay awake thinking of Clara brushing hair behind her ear, the little boy running down the hill outside their home, the warmth of a life slipping further from him every day. But there was more. Elias unfolded the next page. "Clara, I never sent this letter. Perhaps I never will. I fear what you will think of me when you learn the truth. I fear you will see me as a coward, or worse, a monster." Elias frowned. He read faster now, pulled in by a voice full of pain. "There was a village 3 nights ago. We received orders. Orders I could not follow. Orders I refused to follow. I tried to stop them. I failed. I am haunted by every face I saw that night. I see them even when I close my eyes. I cannot escape what happened." Elias swallowed hard. He didn't know why, but the man's confession made his chest tighten. Maybe it was because he had seen the same mistakes, the same horrors committed by both sides. Maybe because he too carried faces he could no longer forget. The letter continued, each line trembling with guilt and desperation. "I want you to know that I am not the man I was. I am trying to find pieces of myself I lost long before this war began. If I ever return home, I fear you will not recognize me. I fear I will not recognize myself." Elias sat down fully now. the lantern at his feet casting a dim circle of light on the sand. He read the next page slowly, almost carefully. Tell our son. Tell him I wanted to be better. Tell him I dreamed of building him the toy airplane I promised. Tell him he deserved a father unbroken. Elias didn't realize until that moment that his fingers were trembling slightly. The man's words felt too real, too honest. More honest than soldiers usually allowed themselves to be. He reached for the last sheet inside the box. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't even finished. Just a fragment. A few lines written quickly, maybe minutes before the man's post was abandoned. They are coming. I do not know if I will survive tonight. Clara, if someone finds this box, I pray they show mercy to the letters, even if none is shown to me. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, the desert silence pressing in again. He didn't know the man who wrote the letters. He didn't know if he died here, or fled, or was captured somewhere in the chaos. But something inside Elias shifted, quietly, painfully. War made enemies of men who might have been friends in any other life. He folded the letters carefully, placing them back inside the box. Then he stood, gripping it tightly. He didn't know what he would do with it yet. But he knew one thing. Someone, somewhere, deserved to know the truth inside these pages. And Elias Turner, lost, tired, alone in the desert, felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. A purpose, stronger than survival. Elias Turner stood under the cold desert sky for a long moment, the small metal box clutched in his hand like it contained something alive. The stars above him glittered with that harsh, uncaring shine only wartime nights seemed to have. He felt the weight of those letters tugging at something deep inside him, something he had kept locked away since he first stepped foot on this side of the world. He had seen death, cruelty, and the awful sameness of suffering. But the words in those letters felt different. They weren't about strategy or orders or victories. They were about a man trying to hold on to the last pieces of his soul while a war tried to crush it. Elias took a slow breath and scanned the horizon. He needed to find his unit. But the desert stretched out in all directions like an ocean made of darkness. If he wandered too far in the wrong direction, he'd walk straight into German territory. If he stayed here, he risked being found by patrols from either side. He tucked the box inside his jacket and began walking toward the faint glow of moonlight reflected on something metallic in the distance. Maybe it was a truck, maybe wreckage, or maybe nothing at all. Every step he took stirred sand and memory alike, and his thoughts kept drifting back to the man who wrote those letters. He imagined him sitting in the same desert, clutching the same pencil, staring at the same relentless emptiness, trying to write something that might survive, even if he didn't. Elias wondered if he'd ever be brave enough to write such words. His own letters home were short, stiff, and practical. He never told his parents how lonely he felt. He never told them he feared he'd become someone they wouldn't recognize. Maybe he wasn't as different from that German soldier as he had thought. After nearly half an hour of walking, he reached the metallic shape. It was a half-destroyed medical truck, its wheels sunken into the sand, its back door torn open. Supplies were scattered everywhere, bandages, broken vials, even a stretcher lying on its side. But something else caught his eye. Footprints, fresh ones, multiple pairs leading away from the truck toward a cluster of rocky ridges not far off. Elias crouched, touching the prints with his fingertips. They were deep, hurried. Whoever made them, they were moving fast. Maybe wounded men trying to escape, maybe soldiers regrouping. He followed the trail carefully, keeping his lantern dimmed. The rocks ahead formed a jagged outline against the night sky, like crooked teeth rising from the sand. As he moved closer, he heard something faint, a muffled groan. Elias froze. Another sound followed, sharper this time, like someone trying to stifle a cry. He moved forward slowly, gripping his rifle. When he reached the edge of the rocks, he saw a shape lying half hidden in the shadow. A man. Elias stepped closer, his heart thudding. The man wore a German uniform. His chest was rising and falling rapidly, each breath shaky. His left leg was wrapped in makeshift bandages soaked through with blood. His rifle lay a few feet away, untouched. Elias raised his weapon automatically, then hesitated. The man was young, maybe 20, with a face pale under the moonlight. His eyes fluttered open at the sound of Elias's boots on gravel. For a moment they stared at each other in a silence thick enough to choke on. The young German swallowed weakly. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Bitte, Wasser." Elias stiffened. He understood that word. Water. The man was dying of thirst. Elias looked at his own canteen. It held barely 2 mouthfuls, not enough for both of them. The sensible thing, the soldier thing, would be to walk away, leave him, maybe even finish him quickly. That was what war taught you. Efficiency, decisiveness, emotional detachment. But the letters inside Elias's jacket felt warm against his chest, like a heartbeat that wasn't his own. He lowered his rifle and knelt beside the wounded man. He unscrewed his canteen slowly and held it to the German's lips. The young man drank desperately, coughing, gripping Elias's wrist with surprising strength. When he pulled away, a faint tremor ran through him. "Danke," he whispered. Elias nodded silently. The moon cast a pale glow over them. 2 enemies sitting inches apart, both exhausted, both alone. "What happened to you?" Elias asked softly. The man blinked, confused, then winced as he tried to speak. His English came slow, broken. "Ambush. Americans, earlier. I run. Leg. Shot." Elias looked at the bandages, then at the direction from which he had come. His own unit could be somewhere nearby, or they could be miles away. He felt the old dilemma rising again. Duty versus conscience. Leave him, and he lived with the guilt. Help him, and he risked betrayal, or being shot by his own men if they found him aiding the enemy. The German soldier reached shakily toward a torn satchel beside him. He pulled something out, a folded paper. Elias's breath caught when he recognized the handwriting. It was from the same box. The same letters. The young man looked at Elias, eyes glassy. "My brother," he whispered. Elias stared. His throat felt tight. "Your brother wrote these?" The soldier nodded faintly. "He was here. I look for him. But—" His voice broke, and he closed his eyes in pain. Elias felt something twist inside him. The war had taken families, futures, entire generations, tearing them apart and scattering their pieces across deserts and continents. He touched the box inside his jacket, feeling its cold edges through the fabric. "I found his letters," Elias said quietly. The young man's eyes snapped open. Hope flared in them, fragile, burning, desperate. "You have them?" Elias nodded. He pulled the box from his jacket and held it out just enough for the moonlight to reveal its shape. The soldier stared at it as if it were a treasure. Tears welled up in his eyes. Elias suddenly felt the enormity of the moment. Here they were, 2 men who were supposed to kill each other, connected by words written from one brother to a woman far away. Elias took a deep breath. "I'll help you," he said softly. The German's lips parted in disbelief. "Why?" Elias swallowed. "Because someone needs to carry these letters home. And maybe that someone is you." The desert wind rose again, brushing sand over their boots, as if the earth itself understood the weight of what had just been spoken. Elias knew the moment he said the words that there was no turning back. The desert around them seemed to hold its breath, as if even the wind understood the weight of the decision he had just made. Helping a wounded enemy soldier was dangerous enough. Helping one who carried the letters of a man whose entire life spilled onto the page, that was something else entirely. The young German soldier looked at him with wide, disbelieving eyes, as though Elias had just offered him the world. His lips trembled, and for a moment he couldn't speak. When he finally managed words, they came out thin and cracked. I do not know if I can walk," he whispered. Elias glanced at the blood-soaked bandages. The wound looked bad. Infection had already set in, redness creeping up the skin. Moving him wouldn't be easy. Elias scanned the ridge. They couldn't stay here. At sunrise, patrols would sweep this area, and neither side would ask questions before pulling triggers. "Then we don't walk far," Elias murmured. "There's a half-destroyed truck about half a mile back. Might have supplies. Maybe a place to hide until I figure out what's next." The German nodded weakly. His breath came in sharp, uneven pulls. Elias adjusted his rifle strap, scooted closer, and slid the soldier's arm over his shoulders. The man winced and let out a low cry, but Elias tightened his grip. "Easy," he said. "Just lean on me. Don't fight it." They rose slowly, sand shifting under their boots. The first few steps were torture. The German's leg buckled almost immediately, nearly dragging both of them down. Elias gritted his teeth, dug his boots into the sand, and pulled him back upright. "One step at a time," he muttered. "That's all we need." The young man's breathing grew ragged, but he nodded, clinging to Elias like a drowning man holding on to driftwood. The desert night stretched around them, vast and indifferent. Every few yards Elias paused to let the soldier catch his breath. He didn't even know the man's name yet. They walked like that for nearly 20 minutes, stopping and starting, each step echoing with quiet determination. Somewhere behind them, far in the distance, a gunshot cracked through the night. Elias froze. The German stiffened in fear. "Patrol?" he whispered. Elias listened carefully, every sense stretched thin. After a few seconds of silence, he shook his head. "Too far," he said, "and not toward us. Just keep moving." They finally reached the ruined truck. It looked worse in the moonlight, its frame twisted, canvas torn open, one tire shredded to ribbons. But it offered shelter, and with luck, supplies. Elias helped the soldier ease down against the side of the truck, then scanned the area for any signs of danger. Only silence met him. He slipped inside the truck's rear compartment. Dust and sand coated everything. Boxes had fallen over, spilling their contents across the floor. He rummaged through them until he found what he needed: field bandages, a cracked bottle of disinfectant, a few small water tins, and something unexpected: a folded stretcher. Elias dragged everything out and knelt beside the soldier. The German watched him with tired, cautious eyes. "You are not afraid," he whispered. "Afraid?" Elias snorted softly. "I've been afraid since the day I put on this uniform. This isn't any different." The young man tried to laugh, but pain cut the sound short. Elias carefully unwrapped the bandages around his leg. The wound was bad. 2 bullet holes, 1 exit, 1 entry. The skin was swollen, the edges angry and infected. Elias cleaned it as gently as he could, though the soldier clenched his jaw and gripped the dirt until his knuckles turned white. When Elias finished rebandaging the leg, the young man leaned back, sweat beading on his forehead. "My name," he murmured, breathing hard, "is Lucas." Elias nodded. "I'm Elias." Lucas closed his eyes for a moment. "Elias, my brother, his name is Wilhelm. If he wrote those letters, he is either missing or—" His voice broke. Elias looked down at the sand. "I don't know what happened to him," he said softly, "but those letters. He loved your family. Anyone could see that." Lucas swallowed hard. "He was always the brave one. He was the one who protected me." Elias hesitated. "Sometimes the bravest ones break the quietest." Lucas opened his eyes. "You read them." "Enough to know he wasn't a bad man," Elias replied. "Just a broken one trying to keep something human alive." Lucas stared at him for a long moment, tears glistening in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. Elias looked away, uncomfortable with the raw emotion in the young soldier's voice. He stood and paced slowly, thinking. Dawn wasn't far off. They needed a plan. His unit could be miles away. If he carried Lucas to them, they might shoot him on sight. If German patrols found them, Elias would be the one dying. He stopped, turned to Lucas. "We can't stay out here when the sun comes up. We need somewhere better to hide. Somewhere shaded, with water if we're lucky." Lucas nodded weakly. "There is a place," he whispered. "A small supply point. Cave. My unit used it before the attack. Not far." Elias frowned. "Why didn't you go there earlier?" Lucas gave a faint, humorless smile. "I thought I would die on the way." Elias sighed. His legs ached, his head throbbed. But he knew he couldn't abandon Lucas now. Not after hearing his brother's words. Not after seeing the fear in his eyes. "Where is it?" Lucas lifted a trembling hand and pointed toward a cluster of dark shapes on the horizon. "Behind those rocks. Maybe a kilometer." Elias nodded. "Then we go there, but we use the stretcher. You won't make it walking." Lucas stared at him in disbelief. "You would do that for me?" Elias pulled the folded stretcher from the truck. "I've already done more than I should," he murmured. "What's one more mistake?" Lucas's expression softened. Something between gratitude and sorrow. Elias unfolded the stretcher, positioned it beside him, and helped him shift onto it. Lucas winced but didn't complain. Elias gripped the stretcher handles, took a deep breath, and began pulling him across the sand. The effort burned his muscles instantly. Every step felt like dragging a boulder, but he kept going, because the letters inside that small metal box had changed something inside him. Because Lucas wasn't just an enemy anymore. He was a brother, searching for answers. And because carrying him felt like carrying the last piece of a promise Wilhelm never got to send home. And Elias wasn't going to let another man's last words die in the desert. Elias dragged the stretcher through the cold sand, each step heavier than the last. The horizon was slowly brightening, a thin line of pale gold stretching across the sky like a warning. Dawn was coming, and with it, the dangers of visibility. Shadows would vanish, patrols would begin. The desert would no longer hide them. Elias tightened his grip on the stretcher handles and pushed forward, sweat breaking across his brow despite the night air. Behind him, Lucas lay still, breathing shallowly. Every few minutes, Elias glanced back to make sure the young soldier was still conscious. His pale face looked even paler in the moonlight, but his eyes, though weak, remained open, watching Elias with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. After a long stretch of quiet, Lucas whispered, "You can leave me, if you must. You have done enough." Elias didn't slow down. "If I was going to leave you, I would have done it back at the truck," he muttered. Lucas tried to smile, but the pain made it fade quickly. "Elias, why?" he asked softly. "You owe me nothing." Elias didn't answer right away. The sand crunched under his boots, dragging sounds filling the silence. Finally, he said, "Maybe it's selfish. Maybe I'm doing this because I need to believe we're still human, that this war hasn't completely ruined us." Lucas swallowed. "Then, thank you for choosing humanity." Elias didn't reply, but the words settled deep inside him like a stone dropped into water, heavy, rippling outward. It took nearly an hour to reach the rock formations Lucas had pointed to. They looked larger up close, jagged and towering like ancient sentinels. The sun had begun to creep above the horizon, casting long shadows across the sand. Elias scanned the area quickly. If Lucas was telling the truth, the supply point, some kind of hidden cave, had to be here. "Where?" Elias asked quietly. Lucas lifted a trembling hand toward a dark slit between two massive stones. "There," he whispered. Elias angled the stretcher toward it, muscles burning with every pull. When they reached the entrance, Elias slipped inside first, rifle ready. The cave was shallow but deep enough to hide them from patrols. Old crates lined the back wall, half bare. half buried in sand. A few rusted tools lay scattered across the ground, no signs of recent activity. "Looks safe," Elias murmured as he stepped back out and dragged Lucas inside. The cave felt cooler than the open desert. The moment Lucas was settled against a crate, he exhaled shakily, relief washing over his face. Elias set down the stretcher and sat heavily beside him, chest rising and falling as he tried to catch his breath. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't hostile or tense, just tired. Bone-deep tired. Finally, Lucas said, "My brother, Wilhelm. He would have liked you." Elias chuckled dryly. "We wouldn't have gotten along at first. I don't get along with anyone in uniform anymore." Lucas smiled faintly. Before the war, he was a carpenter. He built furniture with great care. Everything he made was balanced, perfect. He said every piece of wood deserved respect, even the smallest. Elias nodded slowly. "Sounds like someone who didn't belong in a place like this." "No," Lucas whispered. "Neither of us did." Elias hesitated before speaking again. "Do you want to read the letters?" Lucas's breath caught. "May I?" Elias reached into his jacket and pulled out the metal box. He opened it and gently handed the stack of folded pages to Lucas. The young soldier held them as though they were made of glass. As he read, his eyes glistened with tears. Some fell silently onto the paper, soaking into the words his brother wrote. Elias looked away, giving him privacy. He stared at the cave wall, running his fingers over the rough stone. He felt the same heaviness in his chest he'd felt when he first read the letters. Something like sorrow mixed with respect. After several long minutes, Lucas lowered the final page, his hands trembling. "He was afraid," he whispered. "Wilhelm. He never showed fear, but here, every word trembles." Elias nodded gently. "Fear doesn't mean weakness." Lucas closed his eyes. "I wish I could tell him that." Elias swallowed. The silence hung between them like a fragile thread. Suddenly, voices echoed faintly in the distance, shouting, rhythmic, unmistakable. Elias snapped to attention. He crawled toward the cave entrance and peered out. A patrol. German uniforms. At least 5 men. Moving quickly. Elias's heart slammed against his ribs. If they found him here with Lucas, they would shoot him on sight. If they took Lucas, Elias didn't know what would happen, but he doubted they'd listen long enough to understand. He turned back to Lucas. "We have to stay quiet," he whispered urgently. Lucas nodded weakly, clutching the letters to his chest. The voices grew louder, closer. Elias pressed himself against the cave wall, scarcely breathing. Sand crunched under boots just outside. A shadow passed across the entrance. Elias tightened his grip on his rifle. His mind raced. Fight, hide, run. The choices blurred together. The shadow paused. Elias could hear the soldier breathing. Just one step closer and they would be discovered. He held his breath. A long, agonizing moment passed. Then the shadow moved on. The voices drifted away. The boots grew quieter. Within minutes, the patrol was gone. Elias let out a shaky breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Lucas slumped back against the wall, eyes closed in relief. "That was close," he whispered. "Too close," Elias muttered. He sat beside him again. Lucas looked weak, his breathing uneven, fever creeping into his skin. Elias knew time was running out. "Lucas," he said softly, "you need real medical help. I can't fix this alone." Lucas looked at him with heavy eyes. "If your people find me." Elias nodded grimly. "Yeah, I know." Lucas gripped his wrist suddenly, with surprising strength. "If I die, promise me something." Elias froze. "What?" Lucas's voice trembled. "Take the letters to Clara, to Wilhelm's family. They deserve to know he tried to come home." Elias stared at him for a long, painful moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I promise." Lucas's eyes softened. Relief washed through them. "Good," he whispered. "Then I am not afraid." Elias stayed beside him as the morning grew brighter. Hours passed. Lucas drifted in and out of sleep, his breaths growing softer. Elias held the metal box in his hands, thumb tracing the dented lid. By midday, Lucas's breathing changed, shallower, fragile, fading. Elias leaned closer. "Lucas," he whispered, "stay with me." Lucas's eyes fluttered open one last time. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His gaze fell not on Elias but on the letters, his brother's final words. Then, slowly, his chest stilled. The cave fell silent. Elias closed Lucas's eyes gently. He sat there for a long time, head bowed, feeling the weight of the desert settle over him. Then he picked up the box, stood, and stepped out into the harsh sun. He had a promise to keep, and somewhere far away, a woman named Clara was waiting for a truth she never knew existed.